All right. Welcome everyone to this open guest lecture on cybersecurity. My name is Stefan Forsström and I am a researcher at Mid Sweden University. And we are here today to welcome Pernilla Rönn, Head of Cybersecurity at Combitech, to give this sort of guest lecture on cybersecurity. And this lecture is also part of a course on applied network security that we will talk a little bit more about afterwards. So if you have any questions to Pernilla, feel free to ask them using Menti. So you go to www.menti.com and you use the code 94002725. And then you can enter your questions there, and then we will take them after the presentation. All right, Pernilla, I think I just give it over to you then.
Thank you so much. Hi there, my name is Pernilla Rönn and I work at Combitech, responsible for the division for cybersecurity. So I'm really happy to be here today to speak a bit about cybersecurity. And I have someone supporting me with my presentation, but the theme of today is keeping up with threats, risks, possibilities, and the increased digitalization. So I actually will base my presentation upon 3 questions that I aim to answer during these 45 minutes today. But I will start off by talking a bit about trends and technology and attacks and breaches to sort of place the scene for the rest of the presentation. So we can change to my next slide, please. So these are the 3 questions that I aim to answer during my presentation. So how can we protect assets in this new digital world where organizational boundaries softens out and more value lays in software and information? That's a great challenge for many companies and organizations out there today. So that's the first one. The second one is how can we take advantage of new cybersecurity and digitalization era? Can we share, transfer risk, responsibilities and costs between parties in a new way? I find that question really relevant and interesting since it's so easy today to talk about risks and threats, but there are so many possibilities also using cybersecurity in a correct way. And the last question is to integrate cybersecurity in other processes like software and product development is a challenge for many. What approaches are there for this? So that question we will touch a bit as well. So we can jump into the actual first slide then. So just to set the scene a bit, I would like to mention a few words about the world around us and the trends affecting us right now. We've been talking about Industry 4.0 for many years now, but it's now moving over to Industry 5.0. And what is that all about then? Well, talking about Industry 5.0, we talk a lot about the increased interaction between the new intelligent technology like AI and robots and us humans. So the interaction between smart technology and humans, but also a lot about personalization. We've seen it a lot in the services we consume as people, as consumers, like Netflix and HBO, for example. But these kind of personalization technologies now also enters the industrial sector with Industry 5.0. So that is very exciting. Cybersecurity, that is what we are going to talk about today, but the increased focus on digitalization, of course, sets new requirements on cybersecurity. And we can see that Sweden as a country is really successful when it comes to digitalization today, but we have a gap when it comes to cybersecurity that we need to fill. We're top 3 when it comes to digitalization, but a bit lower and a bit behind when it comes to cybersecurity. There's a lot of a talk around disruptive innovation as well, and we've seen some examples these past years with Uber, and I mentioned Netflix and Airbnb, for example. So there's a fair content of technology in there, but there's a lot about new business models, changing how we and companies produce and how we consume services, which is very interesting. We talked today about interconnected platform. A couple of years ago, it was a lot about connecting things. Today is about connecting complete platforms. One example is the smart cities, and another example is smart manufacturing, where we actually connect whole cities or whole factories using smart technology. And that, of course, is a challenge when it comes to cybersecurity today. The increased internalization is something affecting us all, even though we see some trends now with COVID, more of the nationalism and protectionism trends, but still talking about services and products. The arena is global, and the services and products we produce do not rely on culture or geography today. We see a lot of more spending in infrastructure and critical infrastructure, like fast rail trains and smart trains, for example, which is affecting the whole public arena. There's a lot of increasing threats due to the increased digitalization, but we have seen a lot of increasing threats this year during the pandemic, which is a bit scary. We will come back to that a bit later. There's also a great focus right now on sustainability out there, and there's a lot of parallels to be drawn from sustainability to cybersecurity, I think. I actually heard someone talking about the internet. That is actually the largest ecosystem out there today. And when sustainability is about preserving ordinary natural ecosystems, cybersecurity could be seen as preserving a healthy internet, I think. So that is an important task for all of us, I think, preserving that internet and seeing to it that it's a good cybersecurity hygiene out there. So this is a lot about the technical trends affecting us right now. But if we look into the next slide, we can also see, and we have seen the last years, that there's a lot of data breaches and hacks affecting us. If we look up in the right corner, we see the SolarWinds hacks, for example, that was quite recent, and that affected a lot of companies. And the SolarWinds hack was one of those supply chain hacks. So actually, if we look into the statistics, we can see that almost 78% of all attacks today are targeting the supply chain, which is very interesting, I think. So securing and protecting supply chain and focusing on supply chain security is one of the big challenges we meet out there today, talking to customers and actors out on the market. And this slide represents a lot of big companies. You can see Facebook in there, you can see Microsoft in there, getting a lot of data revealed or breached, but there's also been a lot of cases in the Nordic arena. Perhaps Maersk is one of the most famous, and Maersk were hit by a ransomware attack a couple of years ago. There's also other Nordic examples like Norsk Hydro, for example, and these attacks are of course extremely costly. looking into the Maersk case, for example, we can see that the cost for that attack was almost $300 million. And looking into the Norsk Hydro case, that was 600 million Norwegian crowns to be able to get back from that breach. And it's not only cost for getting back to normal state again, recovering technology-wise and organizational-wise. It's also about losing share value and a value when it comes to the trademark. If we look into another example, ISS, the cleaning sanitation company, the Danish one, they were also hit by a cyber attack a couple of years ago. And actually their share value decreased by 16%, which represents an enormous value of almost 3.5 million Danish crowns. But with that said, of course, being hit by a cyber attack is a terrible situation. But if we look into the Maersk case, there's also possibilities to go through it in a good way. Actually, Maersk managed to treat their cyber attack or their incident in such a good manner that they managed to raise or increase their share value a lot. And that is due to their great management or handling of the incident, both when it comes to crisis management, but also how to communicate around the crisis, both internally and externally. They got a lot of great feedback in regards to that. They've also shared a lot of information in different kinds of medias and in different kinds of ways and networks, which has been very positive for them and for other companies as well, taking advantage of their experiences. So having good ways to handle incidents can make you go through a crisis or incident in a way that make you end up in a both much more positive way. But these examples that I mentioned are fairly large companies, but actually 43% of all cyber attacks hit small or medium-sized companies, which is useful to know. So just because you're a smaller player, you're not safe. Everyone gets hit as it looks today. And looking a bit more into the financial side, we can see that cyber attacks hitting the healthcare industry in 2019, all in all, was up on a cost on $25 billion. So it is fairly costly looking at a whole sector as well. So those were some examples of breaches and hacks. And if we go to the next slide, I just want to mention a couple of words around who the threat actors are and what their motivation is. So we have a couple of examples here. To start with, we have the nation states, which has a clear geopolitical or security political motivation. We have some great examples on those kinds of attacks as well, looking, for example, into North Korea hitting the American company Sony, just because Sony produced a movie around their leader. So this is also of interest to see the asymmetry here, a nation state hitting a commercial company. It's not always nation states hitting nation states, but we have those examples as well, looking into Russia attacking Estonia for a couple of years ago, for example. And then we have the cyber criminals who's in this just for financial gain or for profit. And there's a lot of examples in regards to that as well. And actually, this is something we have seen a lot of increase in during the pandemic, during the corona pandemic, the last year. And there's a lot of increase when it comes to ransomware attacks, like CryptLocker attacks, but also when it comes to theft of credit card details and user or identities. And that's for clear profit, of course. Then we have the hacktivists that are in this for ideological reasons, and it might be a company inside the defense industry or something else that has ideological opponents trying to reach them or perform cyber attacks from ideological reasons. Then we have the terrorist groups that can use cyber attacks as part of their ideological violence. We haven't seen that much of those in reality. Thanks for that. Then we have the pure thrill seekers that's in this game for pure satisfaction. And there's a lot of those. I don't know if you remember, but a couple of years ago, there were a young guy from Växjö that was actually managed to get into many of the large Swedish banks. There was a lot of press around that a couple of years ago. And then finally, we have the insider threats that are actually quite a large bit of the threat actors today. And they don't need to be malicious. Insiders can cause trouble just by don't being aware enough or have the training necessary, or they might be discontent with their work or their employer, that might motivate them as well. So actually, some of the large breaches you can see on the slide before, like Microsoft, for example, was due to an insider breach, not a malicious one, but that was the one causing loss of a lot of data and a lot of negative consequences. Okay, so now we have set the scene, what we have to deal with out there. There's a lot of things happening on the technological front. We see an increased amount of attacks and hacks, and we know who the threat actors are. So if we move to the next slide, we will just set the scene also when it comes to what to protect. And I'm sure you all recognize the CIA triangle, confidentiality, integrity, and availability is the three aspects we normally talk about when we talk about information security and protecting our information and our assets. Confidentiality, when trying to avoid unauthorized access to information. Integrity, to preserve information or assets from being manipulated. And availability, to assure resilience and availability to resources when needed. But these last years, with the increased digitalization, but also when we see how technologies merge, like the traditional IT merge with operational technology and with product technology, we have a much more complex landscape to protect. We can especially see how the OT or operational technology today poses challenges when it comes to cybersecurity, talking about smart manufacturing, for example, where the whole production environment is actually connected today with the IT parts of the company, with the customers. And normally we can see that companies has quite a good way of handling IT security. But since OT security is a fairly new new theme. There's not enough clear regulations when it comes to that. Perhaps your IT security policy does not encompass the operational technology. The IT security responsible might not include operational technology within his or her responsibility. So there are a lot of challenges here today that we can see out there which needs to be dealt with, and the responsibility and the strategy and the architecture for operational technology needs to be included also when talking about cyber security today. So the triangle with the CIA triangle gets a little bit more complicated from that perspective. And then these last years, we also include the privacy parts, because talking about information or data protection since GDPR came up a couple of years ago is a vital question and a vital area for companies and organizations out there to also include in their information security or cybersecurity work. We can also see the safety perspective getting up on the scene due to, of course, the integration between operational technology and information technology. But it is of interest for many companies and organizations to look also into the safety perspective. And that is seeing to it that your systems or IT infrastructure doesn't cause problems or hazards for third party or for the environment, etc. So it's a complex situation, not only out there, but also looking into the challenges companies and organizations have to deal with today. So information security and cybersecurity is actually, from my perspective, much more complex today than it was a couple of years ago. So we can take the next slide, please. So how to protect then in this new complex world? If you look into companies and organizations and the whole society today, there is a need to create trust and resilience, both internally inside your own organizations, but also in this connected digital world of today. And it's also about us as a country having the resilience and the cybersecurity to meet the increased digitalization, to be competitive on an international market, but of course also to create trust and security in your own company, in your own values, and in your own products and services. So trust and resilience is what we need and what we want. And in order to get that, we need to work on different kind of levels. One level that is extremely important today is to share information. And with information sharing, I mean both when it comes to incidents and experiences, but also to share information about threats and risks. And I mean both internally inside organizations, but also externally between organizations in order to increase the cybersecurity level in our society. We also need to have the ability to test and to prove and to assess our cyber resilience today, to prove for ourselves, but also to prove for the world around us that we have assurance in what we do, that we have the resilience that we need. And to be able to test and to verify that, we need a lot of means to do relevant testing. We also need a lot of collaboration. We are connected today in the digital world, in digital ecosystems, and we need to collaborate when it comes to cybersecurity. And that includes both the proactive work and the reactive work when something actually has happened. So if we look into the modern cybersecurity defense or technology as per today, there are a couple of key words, I think. One of those is threat intelligence based. Another one is systematic. A third one is adapted. Next one is self-defending. And the last one is integrated. So taking advantage of this new technology today is actually needed to be able to keep up with this complex world and the complex threats against our organization. So if we start to look into threat intelligence-based defense, what does that mean? Well, it means to work in a structured way, keeping up with the threats towards your organization or your company in order to create a defense and a cybersecurity work adapted just to the situation your organization resides in, and to work in a systematic way with threat intelligence, performing threat and risk analysis on a regular basis is also vital to be able to adapt to external threats, internal changes, fast evolvement of technology, etc. So the systematics is really important here. And when you have the threat intelligence-based defense and you have the systematic threat risk analysis, you need to have the ability to have the adaptive security architecture also. And to have that, you need to monitor and to have the visibility over what is happening. So the monitoring part is really essential here. And to make what you can see and monitor visible for everyone, both humans and the technological defense, in order to adapt your architecture from the threats and risks in an adaptive way is of really importance. And if you want to reach an effective cybersecurity defense, you need to have self-defending networks as well that can adapt to what is happening and also interact without manual interference. So that is about self-defending, the non-manual interaction. And then you need to integrate your risk management into your organizational processes in order to take the right priorities when it comes to cost, and to put your defense and your investments into the values that are of most interest for you to protect. So if you get these 5 ingredients to work together, you have a robust structure to protect your own organization and your own network. But if we look into the next slide, as the theme of today is you're not on your own anymore. You are connected in some sort of digital sense, perhaps in a digital ecosystem, which also needs to be secured. So your own risks is not only your own risks today, they can also be a risk to the whole ecosystem that you are a part of. Or the opposite, a risk out there in the ecosystem somewhere can pose a risk for your organization. But before looking into ecosystem security, I would just like to define what is a digital ecosystem, actually. Well, it is an independent group of enterprises, people, and/or things that share standardized digital platforms for a mutually beneficial purpose, such as commercial gain, innovation, or common interest. So this digital ecosystem enables you to interact with customers, partners, adjacent industries, or even your competitors today. So if we look into ecosystem security, then it focuses on security in these connected digital ecosystems where a risk or a cyber attack have the potential then to reach enormous scale. Look, for example, on the solar wind attack that I mentioned before, that actually hit through the supply chain or the digital ecosystem, an enormous network out there. So the important thing with ecosystem security is that organizations must learn to cooperate and collaborate on IT security, making it one of the prime components when establishing and building new partnerships. And collaboration and connectedness can be used to improve security. So these kind of dependencies need to be part of companies' own security posture, and security must be an integral component of building partnerships to begin with. So this is what ecosystem security is all about, actually. So if we take the next slide, we can look a bit further into this. What is about building trust and confidence in an ecosystem? Well, if we look at the base first, as when you talk about cybersecurity in an organization, people are an essential part. People are important. Today, many talk about people as the weak link, but we want to create people a security asset instead of a weak link. So that's why it's so important to work with security awareness, to define security awareness metrics, to have a strategy for how to train your employees and your personnel in order to create a security asset out of them. And it's when you talk about digital ecosystems, of course, the systems and the technology are interconnected, but it's also about people talking to people, people having relationships. So the importance of security culture and security awareness increases even more when you talk about creating confidence in an ecosystem. And then, of course, you need to have the technological platform to use this new modern cybersecurity technology to build a defense for yourself and for your digital ecosystem, to create some sort of baseline, some sort of IT security hygiene that goes for the whole ecosystem. And in order to create some sort of joint base, there are, of course, a lot of frameworks and standards out there to lean upon. And it's really important entering an ecosystem that there is an agreement on some sort of baseline for a new player to enter the ecosystem. So a new partner in the system doesn't pose a new risk to the whole ecosystem. And if we look into the next step, then it's about planning for the unexpected. We need to have an intelligence-led defense, of course, that enable us to fast detect and respond to incidents and events that can cause problems and negative consequences for us or the digital ecosystem that we are a part of. And this is, of course, all about having technical solutions for detection and response, but it's also about having the procedures and routines for incident management, for escalation, for classification of incidents, but also about having a business continuity plan and crisis management systems in place. But then it's also important to set the right priorities in the ecosystem. So it's not all about having the technological aspects, but it's also about finding a model for risk management in the ecosystem, focusing on protecting what matters, and also setting the rules, setting the governance model for the ecosystem, and to size the ecosystem by supplier advantages, because as I mentioned in the beginning of this presentation, being a part of an ecosystem doesn't just pose more risks or threat towards you or your organization. It is also a possibility to collaborate around cybersecurity. For example, share costs. Imagine, for example, if you are supposed to implement a quite costly awareness program, what if you can share that costs between all the parties in the digital ecosystem, meaning that you can get so much effect, so much films or phishing campaigns or whatever for just an amount of the cost when being able to share with the rest of the digital ecosystems. But also posing requirements on your partners. For example, you can only join this ecosystem if you have done penetration testing of your infrastructure. You can only join if you have the basic level of cybersecurity hygiene that we require. For example, compliance towards the NIST cybersecurity framework or something like that. It can also be about transferring risks in that way. By posing requirements on your partners, you can see to it that they are not a risk to your organization. And by that, you can also share the costs for the risk-taking in the digital ecosystem. And this, I think, is a huge opportunity that we are not using enough today. So I really urge companies to collaborate, to share costs for like awareness programs or different kinds of security raising measures that are able to share and to collaborate around. For example, sharing experiences around incidents that has occurred regarding threats and vulnerabilities. If we do that to a larger extent, we have a much more solid ground to stand upon. But it's of course also about having the right mindset when it comes to contracts and agreements, including cybersecurity requirements into your legal contracts and when having negotiation with partners in the ecosystem. So by that you can build a solid digital ecosystems. So if we look into the next slide, what advantages are there then by early integration of cybersecurity in the ecosystem? Well, by developing a lot of procedures and processes, having SLAs with integrated cybersecurity requirements, for example, increasing security aspects as a part of procurement, having a risk management approach for the digital ecosystem. Of course, that means that everyone that are a part of this ecosystem also get more effective inside their own organization, keeping up with the requirements for the whole digital ecosystem. It also means that you have a better management of suppliers and partners, while also eliminating the risks provided in solutions and services. But to also establish this governance model makes your employees or partners being able to focus on their tasks, not taking the time to worry about risks in a bigger setting, but being able to focus on what they are good at, leaning towards a decided and established governance model. And like I mentioned before, the ability to share costs and risks are, I think, the best benefit by early integration of cybersecurity in the ecosystem. And to be honest, cybersecurity we are not doing just because it's fun, even though it is. But the main important is to to lower the gaps that we have today between the digital strategies in today's companies and the actual cybersecurity maturity. Okay, so taking the next step then, looking into the supply chain, we can look at the next slide. There it is. We've been talking about ecosystem, but another relevant term is the supply chain, which poses a lot of challenges when it comes to security today. So I think you're all familiar what a supply chain is. It's the system of organizations, people, activities, and resources involved in the whole life cycle from development to delivery of a product or a service. So actually from the initial supplier to the end customer. So talking about supply chain security, we focus on the potential security risks associated with third-party suppliers of hardware, software, and services. So if we move to the next slide, there is a big threat today towards the supply chain. And the reason is that the life cycle perspective is enormous from the actual supplier, like I mentioned, to the end customer. So the attack vectors are multiple here through the entire life cycle. And we are talking about so many components. It's the software and hardware. I think you all had the discussion, for example, now regarding Chinese chips, for example. So software and hardware are essential parts. We have the actual services part, taking use of consultants and third parties as a part of the supply chain. We are talking about these aspects that I mentioned initially with operational technology and the industrial control systems and the normal ICT and cybersecurity environment. And we can also see that the adversaries that I mentioned earlier engage actually both nations and companies in this asymmetrical manner through the whole supply chain and targeting both the technology aspects but also the human elements here. So we can take the next slide. So what do we want? Of course, we want to create confidence in the complete supply chain here. We want uncompromised and resilient systems in the end, but we also need to create the trust during the production and development life cycle. We need to have the adequate intelligence, and therefore it's important to have the information sharing. We need to have the risk-based approach, and we need to have the awareness and training. So if we take the next slide, we can see that we also need to have the improved relations with contractors. We need new standards and best practices to lean upon, targeted just for the reason of securing the supply chain. We need changes to procurement strategy and practice, just like we talked about before when it comes to digital ecosystems. And we need initiatives that motivate contractors to see active risk mitigation as a win. And the collaboration and supplier conduct is vital aspects here as well. So if we look into the next slide, I try to summarize security measures needed here. I see the clock ticking, so I will speed up a bit. So during the development phase, we need to look into security measures like certification of hard and software. We need to have metrics for assurance. We need to have security by design and also automatic security testing. If we look into the acquisition phase, we need to have new procurement strategies, code of conduct that includes cybersecurity, and we need to require and practice good cybersecurity. And we have some really good examples right here that actually turns the world around a bit when it comes to cybersecurity. There's now an initiative from the Department of Defense in the US that is called CMMC, Cybersecurity maturity model certification that requires a certification for cybersecurity from all actors in the supply chain in order to be a part and to deliver to the Department of Defense. So if you don't have the certificate, you will not be able to be one of the suppliers in the supply chain looking into a couple of years ahead. And that is really interesting. For many years, we tried to equalize cybersecurity with other aspects when procuring products and systems. And now we are instead, or DoD are placing cybersecurity as the base to even be able to take part of the procurements. So that is a really interesting initiative, and I think that will spread to the rest of the world as well. And if we look at the deployment and sustainment phases, we need to have the ability to detect incidents and attacks. You recognize this from before. Being able to report incidents and attacks, share information. And here all the systematics comes back when looking at audits of third parties, for example. The use of cyber insurances could be useful here. And then the awareness part is really important as well. Doing perhaps segment-specific campaigns and initiatives, doing this collaborative projects inside and between companies. What we see out there today is that there's a huge need to raise awareness inside boards and inside management teams in order to put this high on the agenda in companies. We mentioned experience exchange and best practice before, but also during the whole supply chain, it's really important to see cybersecurity in every aspect and to be able to look for risks and to scan for vulnerabilities in open source code, for example. So if we take the next slide, I think we can skip that one and jump for the slide after. So I just want to finalize my presentation by saying a few words about DEVSECOPS and the importance of including cybersecurity in the development process. Because actually in this new agile world, we see that it's not the Security Operations Center or the SOC anymore that is the frontier. It is the DevSecOps, since more and more value lays in software, and more of the deliveries from today's companies are software. And if you, for example, look into these massive giants like Netflix and Spotify, they release like new software releases and platforms in a super high tempo. So that's why you can't sit and wait and look for things happening in a SOC anymore. You need to include the cybersecurity already early in the development phase. Yes, so this should definitely be a priority for any company that operates in an ecosystem-driven enterprise today. And it's actually much more effective from a cost perspective to include security early in the development lifecycle. We can see that it is up to 30 times cheaper than doing the later integration in the production phase. And actually this old balance that we have been talking about for many years, that the speed of delivery is so important that we cannot secure code anymore. That doesn't exist, since we can see that it's much more effective and much more cost effective to include cybersecurity earlier. So how do we do this then? We need to integrate security teams into the DevOps teams to allow for these continuous improvements to security. And I think it's not only about having security experts in the teams, it's about having everyone being more or less a security expert, is to raise the awareness inside the development community, to take on these methodology and techniques and frameworks to use for DevSecOps and secure development lifecycle, and it's about selecting the right tools to continuously integrate security, to use automatic testing and automatic checkpoints in your software development process. And most of all, it's about cultural changes. So my next slide is my last slide. So what are the benefits if we use this DevSecOps technology? And there's a lot of good examples and frameworks to lean upon out there. We have the Microsoft SDL, for example, and we have OWASP that has a lot of directives and tips when it comes to secure development lifecycle. But we get this thing that everyone wants these days, secure by design, to have the security integrated from the beginning. If we have DevSecOps implemented, we have the early feedback to developers that gives them what they need to be better stewards of good code. I mentioned the reduction of costs. If we integrate cybersecurity in the development process early, the ability to respond to change, innovation, and needs in a much more rapid way. We spread the responsibility for cybersecurity throughout the organization and the development team, not only on the cybersecurity experts. And we actually enable a culture of constant iterative improvements that is so important today. And we also have the opportunity to speed up recovery if an incident occurs. And if we integrate these automatic checkpoints in the DevSecOps process, we can have a really effective managing of security auditing and monitoring and notifications, for example. So sorry for being a bit quick at the end, but I hope that I managed to respond to some of the questions that I posed in the beginning of this presentation, and hopefully you have some questions to me as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Pernilla. So if you have any questions, as you've probably seen during the presentation, you can ask them on Menti using code 94002725. So please go in there and write some questions, and then I will ask them to Pernilla. While you guys type and write your questions, I'm just going to inform you a little bit more about this course that we're sort of giving related to this topic. So this lecture was actually like the first lecture also of a course on applied network security that we are giving. And this course is basically open for applications right now. It's open for late enrollments, and it's actually open for enrollment for 2 more weeks, even though this is the first lecture of the course. It is 10 weeks long. It's 3 HP, so it's a university course. It's it's a very slow tempo in that sense, and it's it's free of charge since it's a university course. And this course is of course made in a project that we're doing that is sort of giving courses to working professionals. So it's very much flexible in that sense. It's made so that you can take this course while working at the same time. And it has a very flexible format. There's a possibility for a win-win project in the end. So if you have you want to do some sort of case study towards a security aspect of that you're working with at your company, you can do that sort of as a project in the end, of course. There will of course be some lectures, some quizzes regarding these lectures, and we'll also have some more applied elaborations, like using Kali Linux to crack some Wi-Fi passwords and stuff like that. Easiest way to apply for this course is to go to our webpage, mion.se/iprof. iprof is the short name for this whole project. And there you can find all the courses that we're giving within this format, basically. And then you can find this course. Or you can actually just go to antagning.se where you then can search for it using the information, as you can see here on the screen. The course itself has basically only one requirement. You need to have a bachelor's degree in computer science, computer engineering, electrical engineering, or something similar, or an engineering degree. And you need to have 15 HP of programming. All right, so I think we can go back to the questions. So like I said before, feel free to write some more questions if you have. I know there's some delay on the YouTube stream as well. I think I'm gonna start actually with one of my questions. And sort of, what do you think would be most sort of, if you want to give some advice to our students, like that is taking this course, for example, what do you think they should sort of focus on, for example?
Really good question. There's so many areas of interest, but the area that I talked about a bit in the end with secure development lifecycle, I think is a really important area. And being a consultant, meeting a lot of customers and companies out there, I see many of them struggling with this aspect as per today. There's been other components that have been driving the development processes before, and the cybersecurity part hasn't been prioritized. And so I know it's a big challenge out there, and there's a huge need for improvement and support and knowledge inside that area, definitely.
All right. So the first question from the audience here is a little bit perhaps more towards these certifications and standardizations. It's do you think the ISO 27001 will support cybersecurity, or is it reactive in its structure? I don't know if you know about this ISO.
Did you say 27001?
Yes, 27001.
Yeah. I worked a lot with that standard during my years. I think it supports information security. I mean, it's information security management system that 27001 defines a risk-based information security management system. So that is an important part to achieve the systematic cybersecurity work. Then, of course, you need all the controls that are inside Annex A of 27001 and describe more in 27002. But from my perspective, the management systems parts are very vital for achieving the systematic work that I think is so important, and also the risk-based approach that no matter what kind of requirements for maturity level you have, the most important thing is to work risk-based, I think, to get an adaptive cybersecurity hygiene. I don't know if I answered the question. I hope so, but
yeah, hopefully. Continue a little bit on the life cycle and stuff that you talked about there. I myself I'm a sort of like an IoT researcher, although some security, of course. But in my area, we talk quite a lot about lifetime of devices and stuff like that. And when we're looking towards a future where we will have connected refrigerators and freezers and stuff like that that has a lifetime of 20 years or even more, what is your sort of perspective on that?
Yeah, I think to start with, I think it's super important for companies releasing these kind of connected products to do a thorough security testing before releasing to the market, because just like you said, they will be out there for many years ahead, and it's really important that to work with security testing in a good way, and that includes, I think, both penetration testing and code review, and actually treating these connected products like any kind of software released for the market.
All right. I don't think we have so many more questions that has coming in actually. I can take up another one of my questions then just to end. So you talked a lot about, people as both a weak link and a strong link in your presentation. You talked about a little bit. What do you see with this, future, or that we already have, like bring your own device type of ideas to different types of workplaces, and also consultants going between workplaces and stuff like that?
How to keep up with the awareness and the responsibility ending up with the end user, so to speak. Yeah, I think that that increases the need even more to have a great security culture and to work systematically with cybersecurity awareness. And there's so many good ways to do that today, like exciting interactive programs to increase awareness, and like cybots and stuff that pops up and support you in the situation you are in the middle of, no matter where you are or where you are handling your device. And I think we will see more of those interactive supporting tools that makes you solve your problem or cybersecurity challenge in the situation that you're actually in. And I also think that, from my perspective, the best way to create security awareness is to train, to do exercises, and to be able to try out things before they actually happen in the real world, so to speak. It's of course easy to read and take in theory, but if you have done things in practice and done some exercising, it's so much easier to act when you end up in a situation that you have practiced before.
All right. Well, I don't think we have any more questions that has come in. So with that, I thank you very much, Pernilla, for your presentation and for your lecture here. And again, I remind you of this this course that we have. So if you want to learn more about cybersecurity and perhaps network security in particular, we have this course that are specifically made for working professionals. You can sort of take it while you work, and it has all these benefits for doing sort of maybe even a project towards what you're actually working with right now. So with that, I thank you all for listening. And yeah, thanks.